A rancher spent years in solitude until 7 beautiful widows arrived, asking for shelter. The ranch sat far away from the nearest town, hidden behind long stretches of dry road and open land. Few people even knew it existed, and fewer had ever visited. This was exactly how the rancher wanted it. His name was Daniel Harper, a man in his early 40s who had spent many years learning how to live with silence. The wind, the animals, and the land were the only voices he allowed around him. Daniel woke up every morning before the sun rose. He did not need an alarm. His body followed the same routine every day. Trained by years of work and habit, he would step outside his small wooden house, breathe in the cold morning air, and look across the fields. The land stretched wide and empty, painted in soft colors as the sky slowly changed. These quiet moments were his favorite. They reminded him that nothing was expected from him except to keep going. His ranch was not large, but it was enough. A few horses, some cattle, chickens, and a vegetable patch that kept him fed. He fixed his own fences, repaired his own tools, and cooked simple meals. Life was hard, but it was honest. There were no conversations he had to pretend through, no smiles he had to force. Out here, he could be exactly who he was. Years ago, Daniel had been different. He once lived closer to town, surrounded by people, noise, and plans for the future. Back then, he believed life moved forward in straight lines. He believed that if you worked hard and loved deeply, things would turn out fine, but life had taught him otherwise. A single tragedy, sudden and unexpected, broke that belief completely. After that loss, Daniel did not argue with the world or curse it. He simply stepped away. He sold what he had, bought the ranch, and disappeared into a quieter life. People tried to reach out at first. Friends drove out to check on him. Letters arrived asking if he was okay, asking when he would come back. He answered none of them. Over time, the visits stopped, and the letters slowed until they ended completely. Solitude became his shield. Silence became his comfort. Daniel was not a bitter man. He did not hate people. He still helped strangers when he came across them on the road, still nodded politely if he passed someone in town during supply trips, but he never invited anyone into his life. He believed that closeness only led to pain, and distance was safer. The days passed slowly but steadily. Seasons changed, bringing new work and new challenges. Summers were long and dry, winters sharp and demanding. Daniel accepted them all without complaint. When storms damaged the barn, he fixed it. When animals fell ill, he stayed up through the night to care for them. These tasks filled his time and kept his thoughts from drifting too far back. At night after dinner, he would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and watch the stars. The sky out here was wide and clear, untouched by city lights. Sometimes memories tried to return, but he pushed them away. He had learned how to do that well. He reminded himself that this life was chosen, that he was not missing anything. Still, there were moments, small, quiet moments, when the emptiness felt heavier than usual. Like when he heard distant laughter carried by the wind from a passing vehicle. Or when he saw lights far away on the road at night and wondered briefly where those people were going and who was waiting for them. Daniel told himself those thoughts were meaningless. He had survived this long alone. He would survive the rest the same way. One afternoon, as the sun lowered and painted the land in gold, Daniel worked on repairing a fence near the edge of his property. The work was routine, almost calming. His hands moved without thought, guided by years of experience. The only sounds were the hammer striking metal and the soft movements of cattle nearby. As he worked, he noticed the sky beginning to change faster than expected. Clouds gathered low and dark, moving in with purpose. Weather out here could turn quickly, and Daniel knew the signs well. He finished the fence, wiped sweat from his forehead, and headed back toward the house, planning to secure the animals before the storm arrived. He had no idea that this storm would bring more than just rain. Daniel locked up the barn and checked the animals one last time. As he walked back toward the house, a distant sound reached his ears. It was faint, almost lost in the wind, but it didn't belong to the land. He stopped walking and listened carefully. The sound came again. An engine struggling, uneven, and weak. Visitors were rare. Unexpected visitors were even rarer. Daniel stood still, his instincts alert. He had not had anyone approach the ranch in months. The road near his property was hardly used, but sometimes travelers took it by mistake. Most passed through without stopping. The engine noise grew closer, then faded, then stopped completely. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not fear, but unease. He did not rush forward. He walked slowly toward the front of the property, scanning the road beyond the fence. Through the gathering rain and dust, he could make out a vehicle pulled to the side, its hazard lights blinking weakly. He frowned slightly. This was not part of his routine. Preferred predictable problems, the kind he could fix with tools and effort. People were, for a moment he considered ignoring it. Whoever they were, they would likely call for help or find their way to town. But as the wind picked up and rain began to fall harder, another thought crossed his mind. Nights out here could be dangerous, especially for those unfamiliar with the area. Daniel stood there, caught between habit and conscience. He remembered a time when he had once hoped someone would stop for him. With a quiet sigh, he reached for his jacket and walked toward the road. As he got closer, he noticed there were several people inside the vehicle. Shapes moved behind the fogged windows. The rain made it hard to see clearly, but he could tell they were waiting, uncertain, possibly afraid. Daniel stopped a short distance away, keeping space between himself and the strangers. He raised a hand slightly, not a greeting but an acknowledgement. The vehicle door opened and one woman stepped out into the rain. She looked tired but composed, holding herself with quiet strength. Behind her, others watched closely. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but careful. "Our car broke down. We didn't know this road was so isolated." Daniel nodded once. He did not speak right away. He took in the scene, the worn luggage, the strained faces, the way they huddled together against the cold. These were not careless travelers. These were people who had already been through something. "There's a storm coming," Daniel finally said. His voice was steady, unused to conversation but not unfriendly. "This isn't a safe place to wait it out." The woman glanced back at the others, then returned her gaze to him. "We're not asking for much," she said. "Just somewhere dry until morning. We're willing to help, to work, to earn it." Daniel felt the old wall inside him rise instantly. He had built it carefully, brick by brick, over years of solitude. Letting people stay, even for a night, meant opening a door he had kept closed for a long time. He looked past them toward the land, then back at the road. The rain was falling harder now. Thunder rolled in the distance. One night, he told himself. Just one night. "Follow me," he said quietly. As they walked toward the ranch house, Daniel had no way of knowing that this small decision, this single break in his routine, would slowly change the life he thought was already finished and settled. For now, all he knew was that the silence he had protected for so long had finally been interrupted. And somewhere deep inside, a part of him that had been asleep for years stirred, unsure but awake once again. The rain fell harder as they walked toward the house. Daniel led the way, his boots sinking slightly into the wet ground. He did not turn around, but he could feel their presence behind him. Footsteps followed, careful and quiet. No one spoke. The storm filled the silence for them. When they reached the porch, Daniel unlocked the door and stepped inside. He flicked on the light, revealing a small but clean space. The house was simple, wooden floors, a table with 2 chairs, a couch near the window, and shelves filled with tools, books, and jars of preserved food. It was not a place meant for guests, but it was warm and solid. "You can come in," Daniel said, stepping aside. The women entered one by one, shaking rain from their coats. There were 7 of them, just as he had counted earlier. Each looked different, but they shared the same tired look in their eyes. Not weakness, just weariness, the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. "Thank you," the first woman said again. "I'm Anna." Daniel. Introductions followed quietly. Names were exchanged, but no stories yet. He noticed how they stayed close together, like a small unit that had learned to rely on itself. He also noticed how respectful they were, careful not to touch anything without permission. Daniel pointed toward the couch and chairs. "You can sit. I'll get some towels." He went to a small closet and returned with a stack of clean towels. He placed them on the table without comment. The women thanked him softly and used them to dry off. One of them offered to help him with something. Anything. But he shook his head. "Storm first," he said. "We'll talk later." Outside, thunder cracked loudly, making the windows shake. One of the women flinched and then steadied herself. Daniel noticed but said nothing. Instead, he moved to the stove and put on a kettle. "I don't have much," he said, not looking at them. "But there's hot tea." "That's more than enough," Anna replied. As the kettle warmed, the house filled with a familiar sound Daniel hadn't heard in years. The sound of people simply existing in the same space. Not arguing, not demanding, just being there. It made him uneasy, but also strangely alert, like a part of his mind had been switched back on. They drank tea in silence at first. Rain hammered the roof, and wind howled outside. Slowly, the tension in the room eased. One woman sighed softly, Another rested her head against the back of the couch. The storm trapped them together, leaving no need for rushed explanations. Eventually, Anna spoke again. "We won't stay longer than necessary," she said. "Just until morning. Once the weather clears, we'll find a way to town." Daniel nodded. "Your car?" "Not sure yet," she admitted. "It stopped suddenly. We tried everything we could." "I'll take a look when it's light," he said. The words surprised even him. He hadn't planned to offer that. Her expression softened. "Thank you." The conversation ended there. Daniel showed them where they could sleep. He had one small guest room and the couch. They decided among themselves without discussion, rotating who would take the floor with blankets. Daniel gave him pillows and stepped back, giving space. He took his own blanket and sat in a chair near the window. Sleeping felt impossible. His mind kept returning to the simple fact that he was not alone. The night passed slowly. The storm raged on, but inside the house remained calm. At some point the rain softened, and the wind settled into a steady rhythm. Daniel dozed lightly, waking at every unfamiliar sound, until morning light finally crept through the window. When he woke fully, the house smelled different, warm, familiar in a way he couldn't place. He stood and followed the scent to the kitchen. One of the women was already awake, carefully stirring something on the stove. Another was setting cups on the table. They froze when they noticed him, unsure if they had crossed the line. "I hope this is okay," one said quickly. "We found some eggs outside and bread in the pantry. We didn't use much." Daniel looked at the stove, then at the table. Breakfast, a shared meal. Something he hadn't done with others in years. "It's fine," he said. And it was. They ate together, still quiet but more comfortable now. The rain had stopped, leaving the land outside fresh and clean. Sunlight broke through the clouds, lighting the fields. After breakfast, Daniel walked out to check on the animals. Without being asked, two of the women followed him. One carried an empty bucket, the other rolled up her sleeves. "We can help," one said. "At least to say thank you." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "All right, just follow my lead." What surprised him most was how naturally they moved. They didn't complain about the mud or the smell. One of them spoke gently to the animals, calming them with quiet words. Another noticed a loose latch on the gate and fixed it without being told. The others joined soon after. Within an hour, the ranch felt different. Not crowded, alive. Daniel worked alongside them, showing what needed to be done. He didn't need to explain much. They watched, learned, and adapted quickly. It reminded him of something he had forgotten, that people could work together without conflict. Later, he checked the car. A simple issue, easily fixed with the right tools. By midday, it was running again. "You're free to go," he said when he returned. The women exchanged looks. Relief, yes, but also something else. Uncertainty. Anna stepped forward. "Daniel," she said carefully, "we don't have a place to go right now." "We were heading somewhere, but plans change." He waited. "We don't want to impose," she continued. "But if you ever need help here, even for a short time, we're willing. We don't want charity, just a chance to stand on our own feet." Daniel felt the weight of the moment press against him. This was the choice. Send them away and return to silence, or allow something new, something unplanned. He looked around the ranch, the fences that always needed fixing, the barn that could use another set of hands, the long days that never seemed to end. Then he looked at them. 7 people who had lost much, yet still showed respect, effort, and strength. "You can stay," he said slowly, "for now. We'll figure out the rest later." Their relief was quiet, but real. No promises, just gratitude. As the sun dipped lower, Daniel stood alone for a moment, watching them work together in the distance. The land felt the same beneath his feet, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time in years, he didn't rush the evening. He didn't crave the silence. And though he wouldn't admit it yet, he knew that letting them stay had already changed more than just the ranch. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm, different from anything Daniel had known before. Morning no longer began with only his footsteps and the sound of animals. Now there were other movements, other sounds, soft voices, the scrape of chairs, the gentle clatter of cups. At first it felt strange, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit, but slowly, day by day, it began to feel natural. Daniel kept his distance in the beginning. He showed them the work that needed to be done and then stepped back, letting them choose how to help. He expected confusion or hesitation. Instead, each woman seemed to find her place without needing instruction. One took charge of organizing the kitchen, making sure nothing went to waste. Another repaired small things around the house, fixing loose boards and broken handles with quiet focus. One had a natural way with animals, calming even the nervous ones. Another worked in the garden, bringing life back to soil Daniel had mostly ignored. 2 others handled cleaning and washing, turning simple tasks into steady routines. Anna kept track of everything, making sure no one was overwhelmed and no effort went unnoticed. Daniel noticed all of it, even when he pretended not to. Meals became shared moments. Nothing fancy, simple food, cooked with care. At first, they ate quietly. Later, small conversations began to appear. Someone would mention the weather or laugh softly at a small mistake. No one pushed for personal stories. Everyone seemed to understand that some things took time. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He learned their habits, their strengths, the way they supported one another without words. They worked like people who had already learned how fragile life could be and didn't want to waste energy on conflict. In the evenings, they sometimes sat outside as the sun went down. The land glowed with warm light, and the air cooled gently. Daniel usually sat a little apart, but he stayed. That alone was new. One night, as they watched the sky darken, Anna spoke quietly. "It's peaceful here," she said. "Not empty, just calm." Daniel nodded. He understood what she meant, even if he couldn't explain it himself. As weeks passed, the ranch began to change in small but visible ways. Fences stood straighter. The garden grew fuller. The house felt warmer, not just in temperature but in spirit. Even the animals seemed calmer. Daniel felt the change inside himself, too. He slept better. He worked harder without feeling as tired. Sometimes he caught himself smiling without realizing it, usually at something small. A shared joke, a kind gesture, a moment of teamwork. Still, there were limits he didn't cross. He didn't talk about his past. He didn't ask about theirs. Believed that some things were safer left untouched. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the barn, Daniel slipped on a loose plank. It wasn't serious, but he twisted his ankle badly enough to force him to sit down. Before he could wave them off, 2 of the women were already beside him, steadying him, checking if he was all right. "I'm fine," he said quickly. "Sit anyway," one replied gently but firmly. They helped him inside and insisted he rest. Someone brought water. Another wrapped his ankle carefully. Daniel felt uncomfortable, not from pain, but from being cared for. He wasn't used to it. "You don't have to do this," he muttered. "Yes, we do," Anna said softly. "You do the same for us." That evening, as he rested, Daniel realized something that unsettled him. He trusted them. Not just with the ranch, but with his space, his routine, his quiet world. Trust had once cost him deeply. Now it was returning without asking permission. Later that night, when the others had gone to sleep, Daniel sat alone on the porch. The stars were bright, just as they always were. But tonight, they felt closer somehow. He remembered why he had chosen solitude. He remembered the loss that had broken him, the silence that had followed. For years, being alone had felt like survival. Now, he wondered if it had also been hiding. Inside the house, a soft laugh drifted from one of the rooms. Quick, unguarded, real. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't push it away. Instead, he listened. The women also felt the shift. It had arrived needing shelter. Now they were building something steady. Not permanent, not promised, but real. They respected Daniel's boundaries, but they also saw the quiet kindness beneath his distance. One evening while preparing dinner together, one of them said, "This place feels safe." No one corrected her. As time passed, small stories began to surface naturally. Not heavy confessions, just pieces. A favorite food. A childhood memory, a skill learned long ago. Laughter became more common, not loud, but warm. Daniel even found himself sharing once, without planning to. He mentioned how he used to fish at a nearby river years ago. The room went quiet. Not uncomfortable, just attentive. "You could go again," someone said. "Maybe," he replied. That word surprised him most. By the end of the 3rd week, the ranch no longer felt like a place where people were just staying. It felt shared, balanced, alive in a way it hadn't been for years. Daniel knew this couldn't last forever. Nothing ever did, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't counting the days until silence returned. He was living in the moments as they came, working, listening, learning, and somewhere between sunrise and sunset, between quiet labor and shared meals, the man who had once believed peace only existed alone, peace could also be found in presence. Change did not arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly, like a shadow stretching longer at the end of the day. Daniel felt it before he fully understood it. The ranch was running smoother than ever, yet something inside him felt unsettled. Peaceful, yes, but also exposed. One afternoon, a truck slowed near the road that passed the ranch. Daniel noticed it while fixing a water line. Vehicles rarely stopped here anymore, and when they did, it usually meant trouble or questions he didn't want to answer. The truck paused, then continued on. Still, the moment stayed with him. That evening, as everyone gathered for dinner, Daniel was quieter than usual. Anna noticed. She always did. "Something on your mind?" she asked gently. Daniel hesitated. He had grown used to their presence, but speaking his worries felt different. He shook his head. "Just thinking." She nodded, accepting the answer without pushing. That was something he respected about her. None of them forced words out of him. But the feeling didn't leave. A few days later, it became clear why. A letter arrived in the mailbox at the edge of the property. Daniel hadn't received mail there in a long time. He stared at the envelope before opening it, already sensing that it carried more weight than paper should. The letter was from a distant relative. Short. Formal. It spoke about the land, questions about ownership, taxes, and whether Daniel was still living there alone. The wording was polite, but the meaning underneath was sharp. Someone had noticed change. Someone was paying attention. Daniel folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. He said nothing to the others that night. Sleep came slowly. Old fears stirred. The kind he thought he had buried years ago. He remembered how quickly life could shift, how easily something good could be questioned or taken away. He had chosen isolation to avoid this exact feeling. The next morning, he worked harder than usual, trying to exhaust the thoughts out of his head. The women noticed again. One of them offered to take over his task. He refused, more sharply than he meant to. The air changed after that. Not broken, but tense. Later that day, Anna found him near the barn. "Daniel," she said carefully, "if we've caused any trouble, you can tell us." He looked at her, surprised. "You haven't." "Then what's wrong?" He wanted to protect the quiet balance they had built, but keeping it inside felt heavier than speaking. "People are asking questions," he said finally. "About the land. About who's here." Anna listened without interrupting. "I've lived here alone for years," he continued. "That made things simple. This," he gestured around, "makes things complicated." She took a moment before replying. "We never wanted to complicate your life." "I know," he said. And he meant it. That night, he gathered everyone together. His voice was calm but firm. "There may be problems ahead," he said. "Nothing serious yet, but I need you to understand something. If staying here puts you at risk or pulls you into something you didn't ask for, I won't let that happen." One of the women spoke. "We've faced worse than questions." Another added, "We're not afraid of a little uncertainty." They simply stated facts. Lives shaped by loss had taught them resilience. Daniel felt a mix of relief and guilt. He didn't want to be responsible for anyone else's hardship. He had already failed once in protecting what mattered most to him. The memory of that loss, quiet but deep, pressed against his chest. Later, alone again, Daniel finally allowed himself to remember fully the past he had avoided, the love he had lost, the reason he had built walls so thick that even kindness struggled to get through. He realized something painful and honest. The ranch hadn't just been a place of solitude. It had been a hiding place. The next challenge came sooner than expected. A local official arrived one morning, polite but curious. Questions were asked about the number of people staying on the property, about work arrangements, about future plans. Daniel answered carefully. Truthfully. He did not lie, but he did not offer more than necessary. The women stayed inside, giving him space. They trusted him to handle it. When the official left, Daniel felt drained. The problem wasn't solved. It was only paused. That evening, he told them everything. No details held back. "We might need to make this official," Anna said after a long pause. "Not just a temporary stay." "It means deciding together," she replied. "Either we leave soon, or we find a way to stand here openly, fairly." Decisions led to attachment. Attachment led to loss. That was the pattern he believed in. But as he looked at them, people who had brought life back into his days, purpose back into his work, he questioned that belief for the first time. A storm rolled in that night, smaller than the first, but louder in his mind. Rain tapped against the windows as Daniel sat at the table, hands folded, staring at the grain of the wood. He thought about the ranch without them. Quiet, orderly, empty. He thought about the ranch with them. Busy, imperfect, alive. In the morning, he made his choice. "We'll face it together," he said simply. No celebration followed. No big promises. Just nods of understanding. From that day on, things changed again. But this time, intentionally. Tasks were divided more clearly. Plans were written down. They talked about the future in careful terms without dreaming too far ahead. Daniel felt the weight of responsibility, but also something else beneath it. Strength. Not the kind that comes from standing alone, but the kind that grows when shared. Challenges still existed. Questions still lingered. But the fear that once ruled his decisions had loosened its grip. One evening, as the sun set low and warm, Daniel stood watching the others work, talking quietly, moving with purpose. The ranch no longer felt like a place he was protecting from the world. It felt like a place he was protecting for something. And for the first time since his loss, Daniel understood that choosing connection did not erase pain, but it gave it meaning. The days that followed Daniel's decision felt calmer, even though nothing around them had truly become easier. The questions were still there. The future was still uncertain. But something important had changed inside all of them. They were no longer just waiting to see what would happen. They were choosing to move forward together. Work on the ranch became more organized. Daniel showed them old plans he had never finished, repairs he had postponed for years because doing them alone felt endless. Now those same tasks felt possible. A broken shed was cleared and strengthened. The garden was expanded, rows straightened, soil turned with care. Even small things, like repainting a gate or fixing a loose window frame, felt meaningful. There was no rush. No one talked about forever. They focused on what could be done today. Mornings began early. The air was cool, and the land was quiet except for shared footsteps and soft greetings. Daniel still woke first, but now he wasn't alone for long. Someone would soon join him outside, offering help without asking. At first, he struggled to accept it. Over time, he learned to let it happen. Meals became the heart of the day. They sat together, talked about work, weather, simple plans. Sometimes laughter filled the room. Sometimes silence returned. But it was comfortable now, not heavy. Each woman grew stronger in her own way. The ranch gave them purpose, but they also gave purpose to the ranch. They were no longer guests. They were contributors. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. It was the first social visit Daniel had allowed in years. The meeting was brief, polite, and calm. Nothing went wrong. When the neighbor left, Daniel realized his hands were steady. He hadn't felt the need to retreat or hide. That night, as he sat on the porch, Anna joined him. "You did well today," she said. "I didn't do anything special," Daniel replied. She smiled softly. "You stayed." That simple word stayed with him. Time passed, measured not by weeks, but by visible progress. The ranch looked healthier. Daniel looked healthier too. He carried himself differently. Less guarded, more present. Not because she had to, but because she was ready. She had saved enough, found an opportunity in a nearby town. The conversation was calm, honest. There were no tears, only understanding. When she left, the ranch felt quieter, but not empty. "That's how it should be," Daniel said quietly. "People stay until they're ready to move on." Others followed over time. Each departure was different. Each one mattered. The ranch became a place of rebuilding, not holding on. Some stayed longer. Some found paths elsewhere. The ranch adapted just as it always had. Daniel never tried to stop anyone from leaving. He helped them prepare, offered what support he could. Watching them move forward didn't bring back his old fear. It brought something closer to pride. Years ago, he had believed solitude was the only way to survive. Now he understood something deeper. Solitude had helped him heal, but connection had helped him live. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the land in gold, Daniel stood alone near the fence. The wind moved gently through the grass. The ranch was quiet again, but it was not the same quiet as before. It was full of memory, of effort, of shared days. He didn't feel lonely. He felt complete. Daniel turned back toward the house where light glowed warmly through the windows. Whatever the future held, questions, changes, challenges, he knew one thing for certain. He would never close himself off from life again. The ranch was no longer just a shelter from the world. It was a place where people healed, grew, and moved forward.